Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I have a very special interview with Liz Reitzig, and I think you're really going to enjoy learning about her and everything she does. She has a great podcast. I was very pleased to be interviewed on her show a couple of weeks ago, and she has a great blog. I guess her main focus is really raw milk and food freedom, but she's also into um, herbal medicine, permaculture. We got a lot of stuff in common, and I think y'all are just going to really enjoy learning about her. So, Liz, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you got started, how you got into this thing, and we'll take it from there.
Well, Judson, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I love learning about herbalism and herbs and the history of it all through you. So you're right. That is a strong common interest.
Well, it's my pleasure, certainly my pleasure.
I would have to say that what got me started was really and truly seeking out the best foods for my children. And my oldest is 22, and when she was born, I had this incredibly strong urge to be the best nurturer and protector I could be, and that included sourcing the best food for her health. And that led me to exploring raw milk products for her, and especially because she had a pretty serious digestive issue early on when she was about 1 year old. And talking to the doctors about it, they were so puzzled. They could not figure this out. So I began to do my own looking into it. And as they say, my own research, right?
Right.
That led me to understanding about nutrition and the importance of nutrition, which led me to looking at raw milk as an option. And multiple things were going on in my life at that time that all kind of led me in that direction. And as I began to read about the real history of raw milk, which I cover on my Substack, Raw Milk Mama, I began to understand why it was so villainized in our culture. And then it became such a secret, really. So that led me on that nutrition adventure, shall we say, which then snowballed into working on advocacy issues, food security issues. Why is it most Americans don't realize how wonderful a food raw milk is, and then why is it so illegal in so many places? So that got me propelled into the politics of it, policy change, the whole 9 yards of that. And I cover that pretty extensively over on my Substack, as well as many other food security issues. It's not just raw dairy, it's many of the food security issues and what that means to us as Americans.
Yeah, and I'm not sure most people realize exactly how illegal raw milk is. Now, I'm very fortunate to live not too far from South Carolina, where they have legalized raw milk, but it's still illegal in North Carolina. When I was down in Georgia, um, I was working, gosh, I don't even remember where I was working at that time, but there was a health food shop. There was a co-op actually, and they would have raw milk for their co-op members. and someone reported them for selling it to a non-co-op member, and they were literally raided by SWAT team. I mean, full up armored, guns drawn. I mean, the enforcement against raw milk was actually higher than it would have been had they been selling, you know, well, at least marijuana, I mean, maybe not meth or something, or but I mean, they went after them like they were drug dealers essentially.
Yeah, enforcement has gotten pretty draconian at certain times. It's not necessarily right now, but definitely in that early 2000s period, it was really draconian enforcement on so many levels.
Absolutely, and it was for herbal supplements and such as well. A lot of herb shops and vitamin stores were raided. And if I remember correctly, what was the name of that senator from Utah? Was it Orrin Hatch? He was real big. Well, he was Mormon, of course, and they used a lot of herbs. And he's the one that really got him to back down on enforcing the, to that extent, the selling of herbs and supplements.
It's always great when somebody in a position like that can step forward and make some noise about it, because anytime that happens, more Americans become aware of kind of this alternative, or this, I don't know what to call it, Jensen, like this secretive world of health and healing where we can have holistic wellness on the personal and the community level through very obvious mechanisms that people have employed for millennia.
Yeah.
So anytime somebody with following or prestige or power, whatever, steps into it, makes a comment on it, or advocates for it, it really and truly brings about that awareness to a whole new population of people.
Yeah, and we need some people to do it for raw milk. Just the other day, I was watching a news program, and they were had an Asian medical researcher, scientist of some sort, talking about the avian flu, the new outbreak that they're so worried about. And, I got the bird flu the last time it went around, so I'm not too concerned about it. I actually had, this was, I guess, what, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I had back-to-back swine flu and bird flu. One knocked my immune system down, and I got the other one right away. So
Wow.
I'm not too concerned about it myself, but he said that, it was spreading from the birds to the cows. And they asked how, and he said mainly it's the large milk facilities it's spreading through the milking machines. And I said, well, yeah, that makes sense because what do you call them? Confined animal feeding units and all that. You get some pretty nasty stuff going on in big feedlots and hog farms and chicken houses and all that. But then he said, but the answer is to only drink pasteurized milk. These crazy people who drink raw milk are putting themselves in danger. I thought, if you're drinking raw milk from a local farmer, that's probably the least likely place for this to happen.
Yeah, some of the messaging has just gotten backwards. And I want to emphasize what you said about local, because I think that's so imperative as we go into the next few years of whatever's going to happen. Like, we have to look at our food system as, is this a walkable food system? And what I mean by that is whatever might happen. And we don't know. We just know things keep happening, right?
Right.
But we don't know what exactly it might look like. And so it really begs the question, do you have access to enough food to sustain your family within a distance that you can easily get to on foot?
Yeah.
Right? And if
Yep.
you think about the model of how humans lived for literally millennia, that was always the model. There were people who had herds of cows or flocks of sheep, or they were raising livestock in one way or another, hyper locally, and then they were consuming the food from that flock or that herd, and they were growing food in the farming communities, right? There was always hyper local food systems, and we don't have that right now.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think all of us got a taste of that during the COVID lockdowns and such. Um, I grew up storing food. We had a farm and everything. My grandmother's pantry was huge. We had a larder. We had the whole bit. I mean, when she made sausage, she would take the sausage and pack it in jars and put a layer of fat over it, almost like the way you do duck confit. and the stuff would last for
Yeah.
years. It was delicious. It was so good. Or it would be dried link sausage, wonderful air dried link sausage. In fact, when I went back to that community a few years ago, there was only one person still making air dried sausage, and he had gone through so many hurdles. He had to keep it in a little case with all these. Like window screen to keep bugs out and all this, and literally they just used to hang him from the rafters. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, it's almost the recipe we used to use. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the recipe we used to use was just salt, pepper, and red pepper. He said, but now the state makes us put a certain amount of sodium nitrite in it. Okay, sodium nitrate is a preservative. It's not exactly the best for your health preservative. And really, if we just had decent sanitation and good techniques from the process of raising the hogs to the slaughter to the process of the meat, I wouldn't worry about not using nitrates at all. All they give you is a nice rosy pink color to the meat. But yeah, as a kid, growing up, you talk about a walkable food system. We had everything we needed on the farm, and then my great grandparents' farm was like 3 miles down the road, and they had everything we didn't have. They raised a lot of cattle, and my great grandfather kept bees for honey and did all kinds of things like that, and cured hams and sausages and all that. But I could walk in any direction, and there'd be a great uncle, a second cousin, there'd be another family farm, and literally in times of trouble or just normal days, my grandparents' home was like almost a community center. They never locked the doors. People would show up anytime, day or night. My grandmother always made extra food in case someone showed up. If someone was out of a job, if there was a domestic abuse situation, if anything happened, someone came to that door, they got food from the family farm. There was no need for any, government services. My grandfather was politically powerful. He'd get somebody a job, he'd get them a loan, he'd help them build their house. My grandmother would take care of whatever the ladies needed. That, if we could get back to one model, but of course it would include intact families and people staying in a community.
I mean, that's a big ask right now.
Yeah,
People staying in community. If there's anything Americans love, it's mobility, right?
yeah, I
With the
used to.
caveat that I've lived in one place for 23 years, so I definitely appreciate that sense of rootedness and home and groundedness, but I know that that's not the norm here anymore.
Yeah,
But I mean, I love that picture you paint and that vision because I believe we can do something like that. And it takes a concerted effort and intentionality for sure. But when you think about what you teach and what you show people that churches did with herbs, like they were a central herb garden for people.
right.
And we could get back to something like that. And it really and truly makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I moved like, 15 times in the first 20 years of my life, and I've lived in 5 different states. And, I was a musician and a journalist and everything. I used to love to travel. Let me tell you, it gets really old after a while. I think if people get their fill of it, then they'd be ready to settle down somewhere and maybe start something like that. But it's going to need community. And I think so much in our culture right now divides people instead of bringing them together in community. I mean, you know, uh, uh, down in the sandhills of North Carolina, just yesterday, helping my mother out with some stuff. A little stray dog shows up in the front yard. For some reason, strays always come to me. So I walked her around to find her house, and the front door is standing open, and the lady that lives there is gone. There's a cell phone laying on the table beside the door. I asked the neighbor. He was afraid she had been robbed, kidnapped, something like that. He called the cops. They were afraid she maybe had dementia and wandered off. Turned out she was on chemo, had gone to a treatment. That makes you kind of absent-minded. But my point is, the neighbors. You got maybe 3, 4 neighbors that got involved. Completely different political views. I mean, a Trump sign in one yard. Well, it was a Biden-Harris sign. Now it's just a Harris sign in the other yard. People who could argue about anything, different religions or lack thereof. Community came together to try to find that lady and actually take care of that dog as well, and make sure her house was taken care of while she was gone. Once people settle in, if we could just get past those barriers and get to know each other, we don't have to agree on everything. And I think that's what's so great about food. Food is the great
Yeah,
uniter, I think.
I love it. And what a great story, Judson. And also, I had an experience a couple weeks ago where there's a farm near me, and they have an invasive weed called Palmer amaranth that's taking over their fields,
Hmm.
and they're organic. So I went down to help weed one of the bean fields, and I think that's it was an incredible day, right? Full of blisters and hard work and sweaty work, but there's something so fulfilling about doing that kind of really meaningful work when you're not forced to, right? I
Yeah,
definitely want to put that caveat in.
absolutely. Well, you do a lot of stuff
But
in communities. Tell
what's
me,
that?
you do a lot of stuff in your community. Tell me about all your involvement with local farmers and community gardens and everything like that.
Yeah, real quick, I want to touch on one thing you said, which was, food being a uniter, a commonality among us. And I think also that when we can experience the same thing in an ecosystem together, whether it's a weather event or the soil of an ecosystem or the trees in an ecosystem, that's something else that really helps unite us because it is a shared experience and it's literally the common ground for us
Yeah,
in an
true.
ecosystem.
Yeah, you always
And
see how communities come together after a hurricane or an ice storm, and that necessity always seems to do that.
yes, it does. But also having that shared experience, right?
Hmm.
Just like sharing a meal together gives you a shared experience. So does sharing a summer together, right? Even a hot, sweaty summer.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so community is really important to me, and I run a local food buying club, so I help connect people to local food sources, and I participate in a community garden, which is a neighborhood level, but selective. Like not everybody in the neighborhood, obviously, but
Hmm.
people can choose to be a part of it. And then one of the most important things for me is my teachings in permaculture, and you're well versed in that as well. But it kind of helps you understand and see people and the roles that people take in community as part of a human ecosystem.
Yeah, it's true. I think most people probably don't know this. In fact, a lot of permaculture folks don't seem to know this. There's also an aspect of permaculture we call social permaculture,
Yeah.
which is that very thing.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. And I love thinking about it, contemplating it, and understanding that we each have unique and special roles in what we can do, the gifts that God has given us, what we naturally are attracted to doing. And each of those are important components in that larger picture of the social permaculture.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm a very independent Southern guy, but uh, Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, he didn't even like the word self-sufficiency.
Right.
Yeah, and
It's not real.
right. You're going to be dependent on at least having good neighbors for your safety. And, Thomas Jefferson's model for America was, independent farmers, independent craftsmen, really all working together in a trade economy where, for the mutual good of all the citizens. It was really the factory mindset that got us away from that.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I like thinking about some of these things, but kind of the model of social networks as either a body system or an ecosystem. So the individuality is important, and what you like to do, what you want to do is important, and it's real and it's special. And maybe if you're thinking about a body system, maybe you're the heart or the lungs, but that's your specialty. But we need the whole rest of it to function together. And in this conversation, of a cultural conversation that Americans love to have about independence and individuality and how I'm going to be an individual thinker, not a collectivist. Then when you think about it in terms of ecosystems or even human systems, none of that makes any sense.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're both very, I don't even know, would we call ourselves eccentric, a little idiosyncratic, a little out of the mainstream. But that commonality, that human bond, is really what it's all about. You take that out, and you have a society of sociopaths.
Well, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's sort of like the definition of a sociopath. They do not have empathy for others. They do not have true care for others. They care only about themselves. Other people are only to be used, essentially to be manipulated, and they're perfectly fine as long as you satisfy their desires. But if you don't, they have no problem killing you.
Well, so one wouldn't want a sociopath in their community, but wouldn't you say that in a larger ecosystem level, and I don't have an answer to this question. I ask myself the same thing too. Is there a function and a purpose for that sociopath outward facing? It's
I
just
don't know.
thinking about it in terms of an ecosystem.
You know, on the one hand, you could say, well, it would be like the top predator in in an ecosystem. It could be the wolf or the coyote or something. But then you're also wolves and coyotes take care of their young. They care about them.
Yeah.
So and they work as a pack. There really isn't, a lone wolf is actually like a temporary phase of that wolf's existence.
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting question to contemplate, and it's an uncomfortable one to contemplate, isn't it? To think that
Sure.
maybe there's a non-useful person. I mean, that sort of goes
Well,
against some of my deeply held morals and values.
oh, I know, yeah, but there's also the truth of good and evil, and there are you would look at Adolf Hitler, you'd look at Joseph Stalin. I could go down the list, and you could say, well, would the world be better off without this person? Well, that's a hard call to make. You start getting into eugenics territory real quick right there. But on the other hand, what happened in that person's life to cause them to be that way? And if they had been cared for more as a child, would they have turned out that way? That's psychology. That's my mom's thing. My mom's a retired psychologist. She would talk about this stuff for hours. Me, I look for the characteristics, and if I see a person that has those tendencies, I just steer clear of them.
Right. On the personal level, yes. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's a it's a big old mix of ideas and topics when you start talking about ecosystems and social permaculture and all the pieces that go into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe there is a certain time, like maybe a time of war or something, where someone does need to be more ruthless. But then again, just war theory, that's not always the best way to go. So I don't know. I can't answer that question. But like I said, I think food is always that common denominator. Whenever you meet somebody from a different culture, different race, different religion, different whatever, and you start talking food and you really ask them about what they like and what's traditional in their culture, what their grandmothers fixed, you get that instant human connection right away.
I love it. And you know what else I love is that food is its own language.
Hmm.
And I've been in situations before and in social situations where there were language barriers. Like I didn't speak their
Hmm.
language or they don't speak my language. And yet we can still feed each other. And that is its own language
Oh
in
yeah,
so
yeah.
many ways. It's a nurture, it's an acceptance, it's a belonging, right? It's saying, hey, you belong here. Even if for right now, you belong here.
Hmm.
And it's a way that, cultures around the world, I don't know all the cultures or all the history or anything close to it, but you can begin to understand that unspoken language.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not good in Spanish. I know a few words, but I can go to a taco truck and order something that looks interesting that I've never had before, hopefully, like brain tacos. That was an interesting, pig's brain tacos. That was an interesting experiment. Actually, quite good. And I like hot, spicy food, so I asked for the habanero sauce. Next thing I know, all these Mexican guys were like, kind of joking around with me. The gringo's going to eat the hot sauce and brain tacos, and I'm like slamming them down and loving it. And, next time they offer me a drink or something and did not speak the same language, but we're getting along just great.
Yep. It's a unifying language.
Absolutely. And if you think in the Bible, I mean, Jesus went in and ate with the tax collectors. Now, in ancient Israel, the tax collector was worse than anything on earth, worse than the prostitute even, and they didn't like prostitutes very much because he was collecting money for the Roman government. He was essentially a traitor to his people. So he would have been absolutely shunned by all the Jews in the neighborhood. What does Jesus do? Go in and sit at his table, and with prostitutes, and with, everybody else. And that sharing of food is, I really think the foundation of our, I wouldn't say the foundation of our humanity, but the other day I was on Twitter and I wrote something and I had to pin it. I had to save it. I said, I do think we're in a battle of good versus evil, but I really think it's also a battle of food versus evil. If we can get away from convenience foods and have more family meals together, I just think we're going to have more intact families. The family's the foundation of the church, of society, of all civil units in life. And so I think the idea of food versus evil is actually something that may have some potential.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and tell me what all else are you up to these days?
Well, Judson, I'm doing a lot of writing. So the Substack is weekly, longer form articles about a serious topic in food security or something that's going on politically or on advocacy. And then I write daily emails, hopefully pretty inspirational. That's my goal anyway, to my email list, which is nourishingliberty.com. You can sign up there, offering occasional in-person workshops, online workshops, teaching about various aspects of our food system or about preserving or preparing food in your own home.
Hmm.
That's for, a lot of busy moms don't really know how to do that right now. So
True.
it's always an issue of finding and teaching the people who want to learn how to prepare food in their own homes. So a lot of that kind of thing, networking with the farmers. I work with small farms on how to market their farm, how to reach their ideal customer. They can also reach me on the website, nourishingliberty.com. There's a special page just for farmers. So yeah, it's full. There's a lot there. I wear a lot of hats,
Obviously.
like you.
Well, and you also helped out my old friend Eustace Conway. For y'all who may have watched television, you maybe remember him in the Mountain Man series. I think that's what they called it. I never watched the show, actually. I used to hang out with Eustace in my teens and early 20s. And real fun guy to be around. We got along really well, and in fact, people used to mistake me for his younger brother. Apparently, we look a lot alike. But Eustace got in some pretty high-profile trouble with the government, and you were able to help him out. Tell us about
Yeah, and I can definitely see how they would call you his younger brother.
that.
This was a number of years ago. I want to say about 10 years ago. And, you know, the buildings that he has on his property are intentionally basically primal buildings, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah.
built
Primitive.
in that style and with that history and that context in mind. And the state had come down on him for his buildings not being up to code. I mean, just listen to the irony of that for a
Right.
second, right? Intentionally historical replicas, not of exact buildings, but just built in a historical style.
Hmm.
And then he got cited for them not being up to code. Things like not having sprinklers in them.
Yeah.
And it's such a disconnect. But yeah, I worked with him briefly on that and finding solutions so that they would essentially understand what it was he was trying to do there. And with that whole property, which is incredible, by the way, Turtle Island Preserve, just
Absolutely.
incredible. I have this one story when I went to go visit him to understand more about the case. I think it was early April. Anyway, it was cold,
Hmm.
cold outside, and I got there and I met him and Desiree, and we had such a nice meal together out in the outdoor kitchen there.
Hmm.
And then it was getting dark. It was still getting dark pretty early. And they said, okay, well, it's time for us to go to bed. And by this time it was dark.
Hmm.
And they said, well, did you bring a flashlight? And I was like, no, I didn't bring a flashlight. So they were like, okay, here's a lantern for you. And your cabin is over there by the creek. And they were like about a quarter mile up that path towards the creek. Now, I had never been here before. I didn't know these pathways, and it was now pitch dark. I mean, it's in the middle. It's a huge wooded preserve, so you have to kind of contextualize that. And it was also probably 40 degrees out by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they hand me this lantern, and they're like, "Okay, see you in the morning." And it was so I'm walking towards this cabin in this woods I'm not familiar with. It's 40 degrees outside. I've got, I don't know, one of those long sleeve button up shirts on,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of my stuff is in the car. I don't remember. Maybe I was carrying it, but I just had this incredible sense of my own vulnerability in that moment. They'd ridden off on their dirt bikes to go back to their cabin, and there I was walking to this cabin. And if something happened, like if I tripped and fell and the lantern went out, like I would have been in the same spot till morning and
Mm-hmm.
so vulnerable. It was just like such a great momentary experience to really understand how vulnerable and minuscule we are.
Yeah, that's typical Eustace, actually.
I mean, it was great. I loved it. I made it to the cabin safely. The lantern didn't go out. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
freeze to death out there. Um, but it was just a great lesson in really understanding and being in awe of nature and God's creation and my own tiny role in it.
Yeah, it's a great place. I used to love going out there. I remember one time at Merlefest, we're out there with like a crowd of 40,000 people, and he and I are backstage. All kinds of celebrities there. Marty Stewart, probably Dolly Parton, who knows? Hootie and the Blowfish, I think, was there that year. A lot of rock bands. And yeah, he's like, I'm taking a nap, and he just like gets under a bush and goes to sleep, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, you were really able to help him out.
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out. I definitely wasn't the only one, but I was able to help, and it worked out to his benefit, and he could be operational again.
Yeah, and it is a cool place. It's oh, kind of hard to describe to people who don't really know the mountains. It's down near Triplet and Meat Camp, sort of between Boone and North Wilkesboro. If you take a side road and go in another direction, I guess that's the best way to put it. But yeah, that's yeah, good memories. That's kind of how I grew up around there with those kinds of folks and the old mountain folks. So I'm glad you got to experience that. That's not something you're going to experience in the DC area by any means.
Correct. Or really any highly populated area. Great model, I think.
Yeah. Well, and those primitive skills are very important. You know, it's like here in, you know, like, again, with the COVID lockdowns, everybody's freaking out because they don't have toilet paper. And I'm like, y'all, there are a lot more important things in life than toilet paper. First of all, we need to make sure you have shelter and food and water and a way to heat your house and a way to cook, and, you know. But anyway, well, Liz, tell us, is there anything I have failed to ask you that you'd like to mention?
Well, no, I mean, I'm always so intrigued and interested in your herbal content too. So that's keep it coming. It's really informative, really helpful.
Well, sure. After we say goodbye here, I'll do a little bit on an herb and tack it on to the end. Tell us how everybody how they can get in touch with you. You mentioned your sites again. I want you to give them one more time, and anything in the future you might want to mention.
Sure, it's nourishingliberty.com. You can find me there. And on Substack, it's Liz Reitzig, or you can look for Raw Milk Mama on Substack. That's where I have the weekly articles on something going on in our food system, something a little more newsworthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the podcast is the Nourishing Liberty podcast, and you can find that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, probably a few other places, but I'm not sure about that. And yeah, that's the best way. All of those ways, the best way to get the content and be in touch.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and let's stay in touch. Maybe we can do this again sometime. And
Absolutely.
y'all definitely do check out her blog and everything. She's been doing a really some interesting series of articles, a lot of controversy. What's that Amish guy's name you've been writing about a lot?
Yeah, the Amos Miller case, which has been wildly misrepresented in
Yeah,
quote unquote alternative media.
yeah, y'all are definitely going to want to check that out. Very interesting stuff. And Liz has some plans moving forward. She hasn't mentioned on the show yet. Hopefully, I'll be able to announce those when she gives me the go ahead. I think you're going to be very interested in what she has on the horizon. So, anyway, y'all, thanks for joining us for this interview. Hold on a minute, and I'm going to talk about our herb for the week.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Well, Alan, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming, so to speak. That was a fun interview. Always enjoy talking with Liz. When I woke up this morning, I was basically had like the kind of brain fog that uh, one associates with COVID and such. I mean, I was really out of it. Don't know if it's because I had sort of an interrupted night's sleep or whatever, but I just couldn't think. I couldn't concentrate. And I knew I needed to get sharp and get ready to do this interview with Liz because she's sharp as a tack. I mean, I'm sure you all recognize that. And I fortunately had just received an order of Magic Mind. I guess it was what, a couple of months ago, I told you all that the Magic Mind company had reached out to me and asked me to try their product. And I really like it. Okay, it's a little drink. I guess it's like a little 2 ounce shot of um, herbs and mushrooms and vitamins, and it's supposed to give you mental clarity. And it really does seem to. I mean, with that kind of like brain fog thing going on, that's the best thing I can think of, honestly. I was good to go for the interview, whereas an hour earlier I was not, to put it mildly. But Magic Mind is a tasty little, kind of almost like a sweet grapefruit flavored liquid. Um, it has some great herbs in it. Bacopa, we've done a shows on Bacopa. Organic lion's mane mushroom. Lion's mane is so good for the brain and the immune system. Turmeric, vitamin C, cordyceps, another one that's really great for the brain and the immune system. B complex, um, citicoline. Citicoline really aids brain function. It's got some good vitamins, D3, I told you C and B. It's got ashwagandha in it, and that's one of my absolute favorite adaptogenic herbs. So really, this one has a good three, four, well, at least four good adaptogens. One of which is also rhodiola and the cordyceps are really two of the more, I don't know if I would say rare adaptogens, but they're the harder to get and generally speaking, more expensive. Really good for immunity, really good for performance, both physical and mental. It's got matcha in it, which is a form of green tea that gives you some caffeine, and L-theanine, which is an amino acid, which also helps with that mental clarity. So I like this product not just for mental clarity, but also for immunity. I think it's really good, and it's something I like to take on a daily basis if I possibly can. The folks at Magic Mind have been really kind to me. Uh, they apparently are pleased that I have endorsed their product, and they're offering a special discount code to my audience. Now, this is exclusive for members, for listeners to the Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast. It's a discount code, and you can actually try 3 bottles of Magic Mind for free. So see how you like it. See if you can feel the difference. I will tell you, over time, using these herbs over time is more effective than just for a couple of days. But really, you should feel a difference. Well, at least I did in the first dose of Magic Mind. I'm going to give you the discount code. I'm going to put it in the show notes, but it's really easy. Okay, it's Judson Carroll Trial. That's it. JUDSONCARROLLTRIAL. Okay. Magic Mind is, I wouldn't say it's an expensive product, but it's not a cheap product only. So take advantage of this offer and give it a try. You only have to pay shipping, and you'll get a 3 bottle trial pack. And you can also get discounts if you want to do a subscription. If you get a regular monthly shipment, it's much less expensive than ordering it, a single order at a time. So anyway, try this out. As I said, it will be in the show notes. If you want to type it in, go to magicmind.com/Judson Carroll Trial. Okay, but that link will be in the show notes. And like I said, I'm not sure how I would have really gotten up for this interview had I not had my little shot of Magic Mind. And I'd had a couple cups of coffee before that, and and some aspirin. I mean, it's just the fog was not lifting. I don't know if it was sinus issue or interrupted night's sleep, or some days, you just feel out of it. You're just not your best. Magic Mind is really good for such as that. I wish I had had in school. Would have been great to have this for taking a test. And it's not I told you it has caffeine in it, but that's just green tea. It doesn't make you jittery at all. In fact, the ashwagandha and the bacopa both have somewhat sedative effects, so it really mellows out. You don't get jittery. You don't feel like you've had a lot of caffeine or anything at all. In fact, the rhodiola and the cordyceps are also stimulating, and so those herbs just work together really well to sharpen you up, give you a little focus and energy. Great for immunity without the jittery side effects of drinking a lot of coffee or tea or such as that. So check it out. I like it. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about our herbs for the week. These are going to be short entries, since we've already done an interview. The first we'll get from, well, let's see, I usually start with the Spring Foraging Cookbook. So let's go ahead and start with Spring Foraging Cookbook. I got a ton of this stuff in my yard, okay? It's Fault Solomon Seal. I have Solomon Seal, and I have Fault Solomon Seal. I also have a plant called Twisted Stalk. Twisted Stalk is often called Indian Cucumber. Really, these plants can be used somewhat interchangeably. They're all look kind of similar at various stages. I mean, Twisted Stalk does not look when it's full grown like Solomon Seal or Fault Solomon Seal. But it depends on what stage of growth that they are. I mean, they can really be confused. And oddly enough, I guess when they first sprout, some people think they look like Lily of the Valley. They don't look like Lily of the Valley to me. But, if you're not used to foraging and you're not used to harvesting wild herbs, plants, whatever, whether for eating or medicinal or I guess even ornamental, as I always recommend, don't harvest things in the first year. Take pictures, take notes, find out what's growing in your yard, in your area, and watch it at each stage of growth so you can be sure. Lily of the Valley, a beautiful little wildflower, very abundant in the woods around me, and quite useful in herbal medicine. But it has a digitalis-like effect and can slow the heart to the point of stopping if you had too much. It's not, generally speaking, Lily of the Valley is not as strong as foxglove, but it is much stronger than, say, bugleweed, Ajuga repens. Lily of the Valley can actually kill you. So you do want to be sure you're not confusing that with any other plant. Now, that said, once the plants are up a couple of weeks, I don't see how anybody could confuse them. And if you've got a good plant ID app on your phone or a good field guide, which I really prefer to plant ID apps, but still, they are useful. I think like iNaturalist or some of the other ones, I think it's the way I use them and the way I would recommend using them is to get a general idea of the ID of the plant and then look in your field guide and make sure it is what it is. I would never rely on a plant app for my absolute identification of a plant. I would use it to give me the clues to go to the field guide and find the right thing. Field guides are usually broken down by like the shape of the leaf, the type of flower, the color of the plant. So you can narrow down quite a bit by if the plant ID app says it's either, it may say it's this, or that, right? Well, you can go to your field guide and you can look, oh, is it this? No, wait a minute, that leaf is a little different than, and that works pretty well, actually. But anyway, the Lily of the Valley is a very beautiful and useful plant. Just don't eat it. Okay. Now we've actually talked about a variety of it that has an edible root. It's really more the tops of the plant we're talking about. But anyway, like I said, I have all of these plants growing within just a few feet of me, so I am very familiar with them. Uh, and the good news, as I said, is that the Solomon seal, false Solomon seal, and Indian cucumber or twisted stalk are all edible. And the young shoots of false Solomon seal are particularly good in early spring as an asparagus-like edible. They're one of my favorite substitutes for asparagus. I usually combine a lot of these together, actually. You can eat them raw or cooked. Use the steam saute method, as I've said many times. This is my preference. You know, some people like to boil in salt water and all that. I just put them in a pan with a little bit of water and some butter and salt. Cover them, let them come to a boil for a minute, take the lid off, the water steams out, and then they're sauteing in the oil once the water's gone. It works perfectly for me, and all your nutrition, all your nutrients stay very concentrated. But, and like I said, you can mix these with any asparagus-like wild vegetable for a really unique spring meal, but you can also pickle them. So this is a great one because you can enjoy them throughout the year. You can pickle the false Solomon seal, just like the Indian cucumber. You can pickle them together, and I guess flavor-wise, the twisted stalk or Indian cucumber is a little superior vegetable in that regard. I mean, it actually does kind of taste like cucumber, but imagine this is like asparagus and cucumber pickled together, and it's really good to combine the two. But so I would definitely mix them. And daylily shoots. Daylily shoots are really good. They would be an excellent combination with either true or false Solomon seal. And of course, true Solomon seal would be good too. These are all asparagus-like vegetables, with the exception of the twisted stalk, which is more cucumber-like. So, um, you can, in fact, let me think, the Solomon seal, if I remember correctly, is actually related to asparagus. You could include fiddlehead ferns, anything that has that asparagus-like taste, and you're really quite good. The shoots of jewelweed, touch me not, that would be a really good addition. There's so many things, so many that would you could combine with this, and I think the mix is better than really any of them by themselves. So, you know, you can do a vinegar pickle. Just bring up to a simmer some vinegar and salt and some dill and garlic cloves and peppercorns and coriander and whatever you like. A little sugar if that's what you like too. I don't much go for sugar. I don't much like sweet pickles, so I'm going to go with more dill pickles. Bring it up to a simmer, pour them over the vegetables, pack them in jars, stick them in the fridge, piece of cake. Really hard to go wrong, right? You want to do like I would do a mix of vinegar and water. Actually, I wouldn't just use straight vinegar on this. Now, it depends on the acidity of your vinegar. If you were using rice wine vinegar, of course, rice wine vinegar is a nice low acid vinegar that you can absolutely use straight. Sherry vinegar would probably come under the same category. But no, I'd go about half and half. Apple cider or white vinegar. Don't really like white vinegar at all, actually. I'd rather use a wine vinegar. With an asparagus-like flavor, I'm going to go with a white wine vinegar and go half and half water to vinegar. And it's a refrigerator pickle, so you don't have to worry about canning it or anything. It's a no-brainer. Of course, you can also do, and this is what I do a lot more, a fermented pickle. And for that, I'm going to use sour kombucha. Salt, sour kombucha, all the herbs and spices that I want in there. I think some hot pepper is always really good in there. Just go with crushed red pepper, or if I have a couple from the garden, I'll just pickle them right along with it. Put it in, pack it in a jar, make sure all the vegetables stay under the level of the kombucha. Now, if you don't have a weight to weigh them down, you're going to want some kind of seal. Go to my instructions on making homemade sauerkraut. There's so many ways to seal it. If it's just a quart jar or whatever, I'll just put a rubber glove over the top and let the rubber glove inflate as the carbon dioxide gases off. You just want to make sure no air, no oxygen touches those vegetables. If you keep them submerged, you're fine. If you can't, you just figure out a way to let carbon dioxide escape and without letting air in. And I'd let them go about Really, with kombucha, now you could do a pure lacto ferment where you just do water and salt. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to be fantastic. It's going to take a couple of weeks and you're going to have good pickles. I like my pickles to ferment quickly and stay crisp. So I always use kombucha, plain kombucha and salt. That also allows me to cut back on the salt a little bit in the recipe. I think gives me a better flavor. Um, I failed to mention I like to include mustard seed a lot in these pickles. So mustard seed and hot pepper and black pepper and coriander and dill and all that's just so really really good. Anything you want to put in there that you like, go for it. But kombucha will cause the pickles to ferment and be pickled in half the time. So, like a week to 10 days, these things are ready to go. Taste them, see if they're sour enough. If not, let them go a couple more days. As soon as they're sour enough, put them in the refrigerator. That'll just slow the fermentation, but it won't stop entirely. They should still have a nice crispness to them. Now, these are wild plants. You may want to ferment them a little bit longer to get them softer. Generally speaking, wild plants are tougher than grocery store bought vegetables. So that's entirely up to you, and you will need to experiment with it. And a little celery in there is really good. A bay leaf. I mean, there's so many things you can put in there, but it's really nice to do home pickling because you can tailor it to your own tastes. If you like a sweeter pickle, you can put in some sugar. You can put in a cinnamon stick. You can put in, whatever you like. Cloves, always good. If you like a more sour, dill, mustardy, vinegary, hot, spicy pickle, then try my recipe. But any way you look at it, that kombucha trick is going to make things almost foolproof. I have never had a kombucha pickle that got moldy. Never once a spoiled batch. Everything always goes just fine. Sauerkraut's done within 10 days. Pickles can be, in hot weather. Cucumber pickles, 4 days. I mean, it's amazing. You put them in the jar, salt, spices, kombucha, um, figure out some kind of way to seal it without, with still laying the pressure out so the jar doesn't explode or bubble over or whatever. Um, 4 days. I've got just excellent pickles that cost like nothing when you're growing the stuff from your own garden. And of course, I pickle okra a lot like that. I pickle carrots and radishes and beets. Pickled beets are like the only way I like to eat beets. And pickle them yourself, and you can make really phenomenal pickled beets. Now, that's one where I definitely put some cinnamon and cloves in there and a little bit of sugar, and that's really, really good. Of course, kimchi and all kinds of pickled peppers, and yeah, I ferment a lot, so that's really my preference. But like I said, it's a no-brainer just to use the vinegar and water mixture and stick them in the fridge, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It, I've got instructions in the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking teaches you how to make your own vinegar. So you can absolutely ferment your own vinegar and then use it to make pickles, or you can lacto ferment your pickles. You can use kombucha. It's totally up to you. And the stuff is so good. I mean, I like to have a little with each meal, actually. I just had a hamburger with some pickled cucumbers. Fantastic. How do you go wrong with that? And some good grainy mustard. And oh, yeah, that's good stuff. So now let's get on to our medicinal plant. Another short entry. But this one, pretty common, very common, much considered an invasive weed. It's Reinutria japonica, that is more commonly known as knotweed, Asiatic knotweed to be specific. It also goes under the names of donkey rhubarb, I like that, fleece flower, huzang, Japanese bamboo, and Japanese knotweed and Mexican bamboo. I guess around here they mostly call it Japanese knotweed, and people absolutely hate it. But it is both edible and medicinal. Right now we're going to focus on the medicinal aspects. Another day we'll focus on the edible. But your knotweeds are also fantastic pickled. So, remember to eat your weeds, and you could throw them in with the vegetables I mentioned earlier, or make just a pure knotweed pickle, and you're going to love it, actually. But anyway, medicinal uses of Japanese knotweed. Um, Usually, all right, let's get this out of the way. It's usually, I will say, classified under the Polygonum family, which includes buckwheat. Polygonum is also called knotweed. Um, the botanists have been changing the classification and such again. It's hard to keep up, honestly. They're always changing the name. So find one little genetic difference here and there, and you got to relearn everything. Well, according to Plants for a Future, medicinal use of Japanese knotweed. The root is antiphlogistic, bechic, depurative, diuretic, emmenagogue, emollient, febrifuge, stomatic, and vulnerary. And frankly, those are a lot of big words. A lot of they're making things. I've explained it so many times before. It's jargon. People use jargon to make themselves look professional when they could just speak plainly. So what does this actually mean? Well, the root of Japanese knotweed is antiphlogistic. All that really means is it's anti-inflammatory. I mean, how easy would it be just to write a word that people understand instead of something that looks impressive? Well, that doesn't get you anywhere, in my opinion. But Bechic, Bechic, really just means it helps with a cough. It's similar to antitussive. It's good for a cough. Okay, diuretic, helps relieve, get rid of excess fluids. A menagogue means it can breathe on menses, emollient, softening. Febrifuge means it can help with fever. Stomatic means it can help settle your stomach. And vulnerary means wound healing. So we could have said all that in a much simpler way. Yeah, it's also used in the treatment of women's complaints. Obviously, as a menagogue. The decoction is used in the treatment of burn injuries, boils and abscesses, poisonous snake bites, acute hepatitis, appendicitis, traumatic injuries, and menstrual irregularities. The leaves can be crushed and applied externally as a poultice to abscesses, cuts, etc. Whilst the dried roots, also have to use whilst, so we know they're English, right? Whilst the dried roots can be ground into a powder and applied externally. Extracts of the plant have shown anti-tumor activity. So, this common weed, pretty darn useful, actually. And they include the edible parts of Japanese knotweed. And really, this is such an invasive weed. This is one people would probably pay you to harvest. So look around for it. You see it in most every ditch, but just remember we don't eat things that come out of roadside ditches because of runoff from the road and trash and all kinds of nasty stuff. But really easy to learn to identify it in ditches, and then when someone has it in their yard or something, you're going to know exactly what it is. The edible parts, the young shoots in spring, cooked, they can be used as asparagus substitute. See, this is another one, and this is a really common one. I mean, you can probably go out and pick a bucket full of these. They have a slightly acidic flavor, being related to rhubarb somewhat, or at least people used to think they were. They can actually be used as a rhubarb substitute in pies, fruit soups, jams, etc. So when I'm saying this is a good one to pickle, it's going to have a nice little acidity to it, a brightness to it as well. Um, it's great mixed in with others, but I don't think I would do a by itself. Okay, if I was going to pickle rhubarb shoots by themselves, not rhubarb, sorry, Japanese knotweed, because of that rhubarb flavor, I would do a sweet pickle on this one. That's another one, and one of the very few that I would put in cinnamon and clove and a little sugar because it already has a lemony acidity type flavor that's just going to balance out perfectly. And yeah, that's really good actually. I mean, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, and I don't like those like sugary sweet store-bought pickles, but I think what they call a half sour pickle, where it's sour and sweet at the same time, really nice, especially with pork. And I could totally see um, this one with its rhubarb flavor, spice it up and have it with some pork chops or a nice pork roast. Oh yeah, that's going to be good. That's going to be really good. I have not tried it with a pork roast before, but well, you get like sweet and sour pork, or what do they call it in Germany? Sauerbraten, where you take usually a roast of beef and you do it in a vinegar and sugar-based sauce, and usually with sauerkraut. and everything comes together just really nicely, and with some good spices and everything. And it's like one of those combinations that you would think really doesn't sound appealing until you try it, and it's really, really good. Really, really good. So I could totally see that combination. The older stems and the tips of the shoot are good cooked. They taste like a mild version of rhubarb. The seed is good, raw or cooked. As I said, this is where it was in the buckwheat family. So the seed is very useful. Rather small. It's one of those small like amaranth and other like chia seeds, but um, survival situation, those seeds pack a lot of fat and calories, and they can really save your life. So learning to identify wild grains, even if you don't really harvest them, except as a novelty, in a survival situation could be essential. But anyway, the seed can be ground into powder and used as a flavoring and thickener in soups and gravies and sauces, etc. It can be mixed with other cereals when making bread, cakes, etc. And the root is sometimes eaten. Now, I have not tried eating the root. I'm not sure. Well, I'll have to experiment with that a little bit. Really the tops are what I go for mostly. I like anything with a lemony, acidic type flavor and the sweetness, the rhubarb type. It's not overly sweet. It's more like a background sweetness. Really nice on this one. They go on to say, although no specific mention has been made for this species, there have been reports that some members of the genus can cause photosensitivity in sensitive people. Now that's true of several plants, St. John's wort most prominently. When you use it, when you take a lot of it, or over time, you can be more susceptible to sunburn. The species also contains oxalic acid, that's the distinctive lemony flavor of sorrel, which we talked about a week or two ago. It's not toxic at all, but if you ate a lot of it or if you ate it exclusively, it can bind up minerals and make them unavailable to the body, leading to a mineral deficiency. Okay. If you had a ton of it, it could actually cause little crystals in your urine, but you'd have to, eat like pounds of it a day. Um, a lot, and they even mention a number of common foods such as sorrel and rhubarb contain oxalic acid, and the leaves of most members of the genus are nutritious and beneficial to eat in moderate quantities. So don't freak out about it. You'll see that warning sometimes. Warning: don't eat too much sorrel. It can cause whatever. But you'd have to like eat it exclusively, and very few of us are actually going to do that. Cooking the leaves reduces their content of oxalic acid. People with a tendency to rheumatism, arthritis, gout, kidney stones, or hyperacidity should take a special caution. Yeah, if you have hyperacidity, if you have, gosh, what is the name of that? Oh, I'm blanking on it right now. Um, but yeah, oh, that's going to bug me. But yeah, if you have acidic blood, which can actually be very, very dangerous, many things can cause that. It can be a side effect from various liver and kidney issues. A lack of sleep can cause it. Um, a lot of amphetamine addicts, like that's one of the main reasons that they lose their teeth. Meth heads lose their teeth is because they're staying awake for hours at a time. Their blood gets acidic. Their body starts to pull calcium out of their bones to neutralize their blood so they don't die, and they get brittle bones. Their teeth start falling out. So if you did actually have an issue like that, I would be concerned about it. But if you're a normal, healthy person or moderately healthy, I don't know. If you were really prone to kidney stones, I might worry about it. But for me, I don't worry about it. And I enjoy sorrel. I enjoy knotweed. I enjoy spinach, which has a little oxalic acid, docks. These are really some of my favorite greens, actually. But anyway, um, yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. We have talked about two great plants. We had a great interview. I'll put the code for the Magic Mind so you can get some for free and try it out for yourself in the show notes. Y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.